So let's say I created another hole right there. Alright, it's an interesting vent so far. Some futuristic vent on top of a house. Not going to go over many of these. Let's go over the Create tool. The Create tool is very useful in the polygon mode because you're going to have times where you have to delete geometry or you're going to have holes in your mesh and you're going to want to repair those. Now when I originally started out 3ds Max, I didn't know a way to do this, so I'd always create planes and attach the two and start welding vertices together, and it was a bit tedious, you know, but when I learned about this tool I was very happy. So what I can do is I can actually go to the polygon rollout here. I can click on create, and now we have this hole in our mesh, and let's say I wanted to repair it. Well, I can define for the program a series of points which tells it to create a flat plane across those points. So starting from one corner to the other, I can click and drag, and you're going to see a red line slowly start to show up while I'm dragging this dotted line. When I get to the fourth and final edge, which is the one I started at, it'll create a face, and it'll fill in that hole that I had created. Useful, right? The tool next to it is called Collapse. Now, I'm not going to show you a polygon collapse because I've never had much luck with using polygon collapse. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break some vertices here to show you what collapse does. Now, this is where we get into the topic of welding. Now, welding is going to become very important to you when you're starting to use 3ds Max, when you're starting to 3D model things. So as you can see, I've broken these 4 vertices. Now, if I move these 4 vertices back into their original positions, it will look right, but they will not be a single vertice. Instead, they will all be separated. And inside Battlefield, this can cause very strange rendering with light maps and things like that. So I want to put these four vertices back to a position which is centered for all of them. And that's what collapse allows us to do. It allows you to weld things, but at an equal distance from where they are. So it's not like target weld, which is this one, where if I click on one vertice, I can weld it to the location of another. Hold on, why isn't it working? You son of a bitch. Target weld, there we are. I can weld it from one position to another. No, it treats them all equally, so it puts them all back into position that are similar. So if I go collapse, it has now moved all 4 of those vertices to a point that is, I'm trying to think of the right word. I really can't think of the right word, but it moved them all to a position that was equal distance for all of them. And you can, of course, then move this single vertice back into position if you want. Target weld is one of those things that's going to become very important as well. That you're going to find a lot of uses for target weld. I'll just show you some quick target welding with a plane and this hole, which is what I used to do when I had holes. Alright, so I'll demonstrate one more tool as well during this. If you ever have 2 objects on a map, on a scene that you want to be part of a single object, but they're not, you can right click on one of the objects and you can go to the attach tool right here, and you can click on your second object and make it part of the first. So now that I have this plane attached to my vent, I can use target weld to actually start moving these vertices into a position where I want them. Now you're going to find times when target weld isn't working. Well, that's because you have to go and look to make sure that there's no other vertices or edges between your one target weld point to another. And I'll try and see if I can formulate something to show you what I mean by that. Let's say this edge here had been chamfered. Let's see if I can get it to, no, let's see if it was extruded. Yeah, let's do that. Alright, let's say if this edge had been extruded like this, okay? You'll now see that it's kitty cornered, it's at an angle. Now let's say I wanted to weld the corner back together, and I say to myself, oh well, I want this vertex here to be welded back to this vertex here, but Oh wait, it won't let me. Why won't it let me? Well, that's because we have this edge and these vertices in between. So in order to actually weld those two back together, we either have to delete or remove the edges and vertices in between the object before we can go and weld those corners back together. So now that I've gotten rid of those vertexes in the middle, I can actually now continue to use target weld. You'll see that I can weld those 2 points together. And you're going to find a lot of times when you're going to need to do that. But let me get my box back here if I can. My undo thing isn't set near high enough as it should be. I have to go back on Google and look up how to change that again. I don't remember. Somewhere inside the configuration thing is the adjust the number of undos that you get. Basically, all it means is that 3ds Max will use more RAM, and you'll be able to undo things a lot more. Alright, so we got that corner back together, even though it's not perfect. What other tools do we got here? Detach. That's a good tool to know. Detach is very useful, and you can do it either by selecting vertices, edges, or polygons. Doesn't matter. I find polygons to be easiest. Let's say I wanted the top section of this vent to be separated from the bottom section. Let's say I wanted to make 2 objects out of one. I could select the top part with the editable poly, and I could hit detach. And now both objects have become 2 objects. Now because I detached this one from that one, it inherited the pivot of the first box. So when you detach something, you always want to go through and make sure that you have the pivot set properly, and that it's not still using the pivot from its parent object, because especially if you detach it from like a gun, your object will be here, but your pivot will be like somewhere off the screen, and you'll go to rotate it, and this thing will go flying. So you always got to check the pivots. And to do that, you're going to want to go to the hierarchy tab, and you're going to want to click on Effect Pivot Only. I don't know if I showed you this or not. I'm going to click on the object that you want to change the pivot of. And there's a few ways to do it. You can center it to the object. You can use the gizmo to move it to wherever the hell you want it. You can align the pivot, and aligning the pivot is going to be very important for Battlefield 2 and Battlefield 1942, because without the pivot being aligned to the proper world, when you go to export, things are going to be backwards or upside down or sideways or some stupid shit. So I'll get to that when we're making our weapon, and I'll have a better opportunity to show you more about that. Anyways, let's go back to our editable poly rollout and see what other tools I can show you here. Slice plane. That's a good one to know. I'm just going to delete these objects, and I'm going to start it with another box so that I can show you what slice plane does. Now there are a lot of ways with the editable poly rollout to create more edges. One of them, for instance, is inside the edge rollout. It's called cut, and you can highlight cut, and you can draw one edge to another, and so on and so forth, and create a bunch of edges if you want. That's one way. If you want something a little more precise, let's say you want to divide this box along a plane, you can use the slice plane. Now the way the slice plane works is you click on slice plane, and this little orange transparent box is going to show up. And along with it is going to be the edges that it's going to create, highlighted in red. Now what you want to do is you want to highlight this slice plane to whatever place you want it to be at. Leave it there, and then hit slice, and turn slice plane off. And you'll now see that that slice plane created some edges for me. That's a very useful tool for making edges. I find it to be a lot better than cut, even though cut is quicker sometimes. I'll go into mesh smooth in a minute. Actually, I won't go into mesh smooth in this series. I'll go into mesh smooth into more detail when we are using when we were making a weapon, because we have to show you smoothing groups and things like that. Nothing else I want to show you in there. No, I think that's about it for the editable poly rollout. Feel free to watch